Welcome to another episode of Everything Intellectual Property. Today, we have a very special guest with us. This person has taken the ice cream truck goodies of yesteryear and reinvented them with a little bit of humor and artist techniques. Please help me welcome the founder of Life Raft Treats, Cynthia Wong.
Hey,
How
dude.
is it going, Cynthia?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for doing this. I'm excited to talk to you. I know we were talking a little bit offhand, and again, thanks again for sending me some product to test out. I will tell you that the bucket is almost gone. Which I'm trying to hold off. I know I'm my buddy who actually helps me out with the with the edits for the podcast and just kind of the content creation. He's supposed to be stopping by later on this week, and he was like, "Hey, man, just hold on. Let me get one of them before you take them all down." So
Need some more too.
I'm trying to hold off, but those were really good.
Thank you.
And it's a nice treat for me, especially from a long day at work from time to time.
But
So what? First off, Happy New Year! And typically, what I like to do at the beginning, it just if you can maybe explain or at least describe, I would say, kind of what you have kind of created in terms of the product and the different treats that you guys have, and kind of talk about it a little bit so that the audience, if they're maybe listening to this thing not only on audio, they have maybe a better idea of kind of what's going on or kind of what business you're involved in.
all right, sure. So we are a small ice cream company based in Charleston, South Carolina.
Nice.
Our specialty is novelties, so like little handheld treats, like something you'd get off an ice cream truck, not pints or scoops or a shot, but these funny little individual treats. And we found during the pandemic that our niche was making ice cream look like other food. So if you are at the grocery store and you see all these other things like candies that now look like mac and cheese and pickles and all that stuff, we're sorry. That was kind of us. We sort of really got that out there and started this whole plague of food-shaped ice cream and other things like that. But yeah, that's our specialty. It's really fun. We use great ingredients. We have a great team, and we're happy and lucky to be here in 2025, still in business.
Nice. So, and I kind of pulled up as you were talking. I pulled up the website here. So, what you sent me is the not fried chicken, which is amazing. But I just from the audience who may be looking at this thing on video, some of the other items or products that you guys have. So, I have the not fried chicken. I've tasted that, and that's amazing. You have the hot dog here. Yeah.
Mhm.
Some peaches, and then now what is this right here on the upper right hand corner?
Well, since we're in Charleston, that's a seafood platter.
Oh, gotcha.
There, if you look really closely, there's lobster, and on the far right side, some shrimp, some oysters, and then 2 lemons.
Gotcha. Okay, and as you were talking, I'm like, okay, these look like shrimp and lobster. So that
Look, that's kind of weird, but yeah.
No worries. Huh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So yeah, just in terms of if the audience is looking on video, I just wanted to pull up the website just so they can get a chance to kind of see what it was that you guys have going on. So hold on, you talked about, did you guys start like during the pandemic of the business, or is that when things happened?
That was when the big, huge growth happened, which was, again, we were really, really lucky. I started in May of 2018, and I kind of started in a way where I was super sick of working in restaurants. I was a pastry chef in restaurants, and I was like, you know what? I'm really not into working this much for somebody else and just all of this. And, and also, as things have changed, it was kind of becoming obvious that restaurants weren't really going to have pastry chefs anymore because labor, cost of goods, all those things, dessert can get squeezed out, can get bought from somewhere else. And so I was like, ooh, this career path is going to evaporate in a couple of years. So I started this ice cream company, mostly because I'd always loved ice cream, and I have 2 little boys. And so I had this idea in my mind. This is hilarious. This is the funny part.
Okay.
As I do in my mind that if it were ice cream, I can make all of it, put it in the freezer, and go, hang out with my kids. But of course, it hasn't turned out like that. It's like, no, I got to make more ice cream, and I got to make more ice cream and all this other stuff. But it still is, there are aspects of ice cream that are really hard. Like, it's frozen. The cold chain is really hard, other things like that. But then there are also things that are great about it, which is it's ice cream. Everybody loves it. It's really fun. It makes people happy. It makes me happy. So that stuff is good. So we started 2018, and it was mostly just me. I would make the ice cream in the morning and then get on the truck and sell it in the afternoon. Because I honestly was like, what? I don't really know if this is going to work or not. I don't really have any plans for this. I just want something better than what I'm doing now. And if I'm going to work this much, I'm going to work this much for myself.
Right.
So we went on like that through 2018, 2019, started to pick up a little bit. Restaurants got interested. So we started making custom treats for restaurants. And then in 2020, when the pandemic happened, Goldbelly reached out to us and they were like, you should start shipping this. And we were like, oh, we don't know if we can, and blah, blah, blah. And we were sort of in a position where we were working out of a commissary. So when everything shut down, we were really lucky that we didn't have a shop that we had to pay rent on. We didn't have a big facility we had to pay rent on. We could just roll up in a ball and wait for it to all be over. And so we were extremely fortunate. And we're also very fortunate because everyone was on their phones at their houses looking at Instagram. And because our treats are so visual, they're not like an ice cream sandwich or a bar, which, those can be really good and look really great, but they're not as, they don't capture attention the way that
pop out as much as the other.
Yep. And so that was how we kind of started figuring out that, oh, this is the niche that we should lean into. And it just, the big growth happened then. And we were just really lucky and the timing worked out.
Nice. So then let me ask you this, because I have a few questions. So again, I think everybody to a certain extent maybe should, I know you talked about, hey, if I guess your situation was twofold. Number one, you seems like you had the foresight to say, okay, these pastry chefs maybe are not going to be around, in the near future, as kind of things start to get more expensive. But number two, if you're going to be working that much for anybody, it might as well be for yourself. And I'm always a proponent, and I may be a little biased as an IP attorney, to say everybody should have something going on, whether or not you are invested in somebody else's kind of goals. If you don't kind of want to kind of do the work yourself, or to the extent that you're willing to do the work and have the vision or have some type of kind of product or whatever the case may be, service, to be able to kind of bring that to the forefront, just because it's different from, I know on Shark Tank, which we'll get off into a little bit later, you talked about how your kind of parents, I think maybe came here as immigrants in the 70s or 80s. And kind of back then, it was common place to work 20, 30 years for a company, get a pension, and kind of ride off into the sunset, so to speak. But it seems like that's not the norm anymore, with maybe pensions kind of going away and kind of jobs kind of laying people off right and left and things like that. So would your recommendation, and I want to say call it a recommendation, but how would you kind of square that hole as far as kind of talking to other people to say, hey, maybe don't kind of rely as much on maybe corporate America or kind of these bigger jobs as much as maybe our kind of parents or grandparents of yesteryear did, but also just in terms of just having something kind of separate going on that you can kind of really take pride in and kind of work on and hopefully kind of build up one day and make money for yourself. So how do you kind of give that, or what would your kind of advice or instruction be when talking to someone else about kind of that?
I think that those are all really good points. And, it's a twofold thing where companies aren't the way they were in the beginning either. They don't care about labor as much. They don't care about the employees as much. And part of that is because, it's so expensive to do anything now. Even just within the 6 years that this business has been opened, the cost of almost everything that we touch and do and make has more than doubled. And that gets really difficult. And so, of course, that first thing that cuts into for most companies is going to be the paycheck, the pension, the benefits, all those things. So, I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea while people are young and they're trying to figure out what they want to do to have some sort of corporate job so you can sock some money away. You have some time and space to think about what you want to do.
Yep.
And my whole sort of philosophy on life, and I try to tell my kids this, is you don't really need to start thinking seriously about what you want to do with your life until you're 30. Okay. I think there's a lot of pressure from social media where it's always a highlight reel, where people look like they're like 19 and millionaires, successful, and look at all the stuff I did. But that's the highlight reel. We don't really know what's going on. And so I think a lot of young people these days feel a lot of pressure to have all the answers. But, you can have a job that you're not totally in love with in your 20s while you're thinking about what you want to do and figuring that out. But by the time you're 30, you should start getting on that path to that. And then maybe by the time you're 40, you've established what that thing is. Right. And owning your own business and being your own boss isn't for everyone. I totally get that. Sometimes I'm like, man, I wish all these problems were somebody else's, but this is my problem. And part of it's kind of great because I'm like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get us out of this and we're going to go in this direction. And part of it's also like, it would just be really nice if someone just gave me a paycheck right now.
For sure.
I think particularly for women and for minorities too, it's very hard to have your own business. It's very hard to have access to capital. It's very hard to have those kind of connections. but it's also even harder to a certain extent to thrive in the corporate world.
For sure. Yep.
Yeah.
And again, I just think of like social media or e-commerce platforms being like a great equalizer because really, if the product is great and if people see a need for it or want it, they don't necessarily. I mean, again, in some cases, you can have kind of the owner or whatever kind of be a part of the brand and being like a face of the brand, but with Amazon or if you're on social media, Instagram, Facebook, whatever the case may be, and it's a product that looks interesting and marketed and it is marketed correctly, it seems like that will kind of help out without you having to have these all these relationships that you talked about
Yeah.
kind of previously, which and I don't know. I think for me also just kind of having a little bit of insight as a patent attorney specifically of kind of knowing what I'm working on and all the kind of automation that's taking place. And trust me, this automation is not taking place for the sake of just kind of filing patents on it and whatever the case may be. This automation is taking place to, kind of take somebody else's job. So that's kind of number one. But then number two, I've kind of helped people over and over again, time and time again, where they had something pretty simple when they kind of built the business off of it. And again, it doesn't have to be the next, you don't have to be the next Einstein or kind of sending rockets to the moon or whatever the case may be.
Right.
If you have some type of product that people kind of can get down with or people find useful, you can sell this thing on Amazon or whatever the case may
Yeah.
be, and you make 300-400 grand a year, that's still pretty good money, and probably going to be more money than you're going to make at that at whatever corporate gig or professional job that you
Exactly.
have now. Like you said, it may come with the ups and downs of running a business, but I think it's more than worthwhile, and then something that you can also pass down to your kids if that's something that you that is important to you as well. So I don't know. I guess that's kind of my take, just kind of being on this side of the fence.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mm. So
100%.
I'll go ahead.
No, you're totally right. No, I agree with all that. And, that was kind of one of my decisions too in starting this business was I'm as a pastry chef, there's only so much money I'm ever going to make. I mean, it's not a highly paid career position. The only way I'm going to make money off of what I've learned and the skills I've developed is doing it on my own.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, and that's a big thing in terms of well, I think we were talking about at the beginning of this thing, or maybe offline, as far as kind of me, kind of being a practitioner at this point for about 10 years, and kind of now kind of wanting to maybe not transition, but also do so on the other side where I have kind of products and things like that that I'm selling because even though I'm kind of maybe a more higher price, uh, I guess I have a higher kind of price job in terms of kind of charging per hour. At
Hmm.
the end of the day, I'm still selling time, and anytime you're
Hmm.
selling time, it's kind of limit or cap on what you can make, as opposed to kind of coming up with a product and kind of being able to kind of sell it anywhere, even when you're asleep, and kind of make money that way. So
Right.
I don't know. That's something that I kind of
Yeah.
think about more and
Right.
more as kind of time goes on. I did want to ask you this: what made you get off into like being a pastry chef? Did you always love to cook? Did you always love to make desserts? Again, I know we talked about kind of coming here as or your parents came here as
Yeah.
immigrants. I'm not sure if they were big into cooking. How did that kind of career path evolve or develop for you?
Yeah, my parents were big into cooking and they're amazing cooks and love that's kind of their Asian parents are great. They gave us everything. They're amazing, but that's kind of how they express love. They're not, super cuddly, squishy parents. They showed us love by giving us everything we needed and then more beyond just what, is what most parents do and with food. And I always loved all the things I made and I always wanted to be a baker. I was just one of those weird little kids where I was like, I want to be a baker. I don't know where it came from. I don't know how it developed or why it was like that. But it was just, I was stuck on that from when I was a kid and I did it.
Now, so did they have like maybe a restaurant or anything like that, or they just kind of cook for you guys at home or whatnot?
They cooked for us at home and they were
Okay.
just really great cooks.
Nice. And that's funny you said that because my mom is a really good, a great cook, and I kind of was posting on social media the other day that I think I'm a better person having had her food
Yeah,
uh up
great.
until this point. But then she always talks to me about like restaurants and things like that, and always I guess maybe I said this to her once or twice, but at least in my head I'm telling myself it's like it's a difference between being a great cook than running a restaurant. So I guess with that being said, how has kind of because you could talk to that kind of a little bit more intimately having being a pastry chef, but also kind of running more or less of a business that's kind of dealing with food, and now you're not just having to worry about kind of making the product or the desserts or the food or whatever the case may be, but now you have to worry about the business side of things. So can you talk a little bit about the kind of the I don't want to say the difficulty of it, but kind of just that part of the business that maybe people don't think about when they kind of love to cook or they're great cooks. That okay, that's a part of the business, but you have
Yeah.
this other side of things, like you said, kind of paying rent and kind of food costs going up and all this other stuff that you maybe don't appreciate as much, at least at the beginning.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, a lot of people say, "Oh, I love to make cookies. I'm really good at it." Everyone tells me I should start my own bakery or start selling cookies. Maybe you want to think about that for a minute because the business side's really difficult and you have to deal with things that you might just not have an aptitude for or a stomach for. I'm very lucky because my husband is my business partner and he worked in large grocery and high-end retail for about a decade. So he's just really good at dealing with the business side of things. And he takes care of that. And I learn things from him. And I deal with the culinary production side and hiring and creating systems. But he deals with, our distributors and the accounting and all that kind of stuff. And if he weren't with me, I don't think we would have had this kind of growth at all unless I had been able to find enough money to hire someone like him, which was kind of the great part was he was done with his corporate job.
Gotcha.
And
So it's like everybody's getting out of the corporate.
he's like, I'm done with corporate stuff. I can't do this anymore. I was like, well, you know what? That's great because I need someone like you, but I can't afford you. So guess what? It's you because you're trapped. You're
Right. One of the parts of being married to me.
Yeah. So he's like, okay. And, it's really hard to work with your spouse, but as we've gone through the years, we've learned more and more how to navigate this together. And what he's good at, he's so incredibly good at. And I let him do that and encourage him to do that and try to take everything else away from him so he can focus on that.
Okay.
And that's kind of the thing about, and the joke in the family is I've ruined a perfectly good hobby by turning it to this business. But, it's you can do this if you're really passionate about it. But you've got to either develop those skills, know what those skills are, find a way to get yourself trained, or find that partner who can do that and figure out how to build that partnership. And I'm not really pro partners because I think that's very, very difficult when it's someone outside your family. It's extremely difficult, but I can't imagine trying to do this by myself.
Right. No, yeah, for sure. And I think that's one of the things with business. It seems like kind of you're going to go farther together as opposed to just kind of by yourself. And I always kind of find it interesting. And I think kind of answers a little bit about kind of having that kind of husband and wife dynamic. Because I think especially when you guys both bring something different to the table, as it seems like you guys do, bringing something different to the table. And like I said, it's going to have its kind of challenges as you guys kind of get off into a good groove of things. But if you can kind of find a sweet spot of, okay, I'm going to let you do what you're good at and I'm going to do what I'm good at. And, we're going to stay out each other's way, so to speak, and make this thing work. I think it can be beneficial. And it seems like just, I don't know, maybe kind of, I don't want to say back in the day, but it seems like kind of that was maybe more of a norm where you have more family businesses as opposed to kind of everybody kind of going their separate ways and then kind of coming back in the evenings. I don't know. I'm always fascinated about kind of that husband, wife, kind of being able to start that business together, especially when, people can make it work. Because I do think that's just another option as opposed to when you're talking about, okay, just not both going into corporate or whatever the case may be, but that we can work together and kind of bring something to I guess, to life that we kind of both maybe enjoy doing and then maybe pass that down to the kids or whatever the case may be. But it seems like, I don't know, it's always another option, which I think people need to kind of think more about.
Yep.
So, oh, that's cool. So then, I was going to ask you this before we get off into the Shark Tank stuff. Just from the IP side of things, did you know anything? I know I'm telling you a little bit about my kind of IP story or the origin for the podcast. Did you know anything about intellectual property? Because I know you guys have a number of different trademarks. So I guess before kind of, again, one of the things that people don't maybe think about with business, again, I know you being a pastry chef and kind of thinking about the cooking and like you said, your husband doing good with kind of the distributors or whatnot, but then there's also this kind of IP side of things, whether it's patents, trademarks, trade secrets, whatever the case may be. So did you have an idea of that coming into it or not so much?
I had a little bit of an idea about it. And what got really interesting was when I first started making the not fried chicken ice cream bar, which is it's like 99% of the business. It's everywhere. It's amazing. Thank you. We've been really lucky to be able to figure out how to produce it at scale. I started making that in the last restaurant I worked in, and the owner of the restaurant knew that it was going to be something big, and he wanted to own it. He felt, yeah, he felt like he had some sort of ownership over it because I had created it while I was working for him. And so it got to the point when I left, we had lawyers, and the lawyers were talking about all this. And what I learned was that, and I kind of known this initial part of it before, was that with food, you can't trademark a recipe. You can copyright a recipe in a book, but the recipe itself, it doesn't really belong to anyone in any real way. But you can trademark a name. And a lot of times with a product, the product is about the name and the branding more than it is about the product. Like Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola, it's a cola, but it's Coca-Cola because it's that red can and it's that name. You can make a cola that's just like Coke, but you can't name it Coca-Cola. And so it's kind of that thing with these creations. It's like not fried chicken. That's a registered trademark. The name is registered trademark. So if you are trying to copy my product, you have to find a way around saying those words to describe it, which is going to be really hard. Yep. And so, in the course of me leaving this job and things getting really contentious when I was leaving about who owned what, I learned this is very, very interesting. The idea of it didn't really belong to anybody because I had the recipe in a book, and the book was not locked behind, lock and key. And I had gone on like a video show explaining how to make it. It was out there. So now that it was out there, it didn't belong to him. It didn't belong to me. And so that was kind of lucky because it would have been harder for me to prove that it was a proprietary recipe and belonged completely to me than it was to say, well, it doesn't belong to him either. So that was where it ended. And it was really interesting thing to learn. And, I think for young cooks and chefs and young creators that work for other companies, it's something that they need to keep an eye out on and think about.
No, and I agree with you. And I think one of the things that you're talking about, even though you maybe didn't say the exact wording, is trade secrets. So when you're talking about the lock and key, if it was kind of, kept secret such that it wasn't out there, wasn't kind of in a public domain, then it seems like that would have presented some challenges for you as far as kind of them owning your prior kind of employer owning that kind of trade secret to it. But it seems like since you had already kind of published it or disclosed it to the public, then it was already out there, and therefore it couldn't be it can't be a trade secret, and therefore now it just becomes a branding standpoint from like trademarks and things like that. But I think that's something that, especially when you're talking about the food industry, when you're food industry, Coca-Cola, you talk about that they have a trade secret on, or they have trade secret protection on how they make their version of the cola. Again, like you said, Coca-Cola, that's a brand name. And the ingredients is, you have to list that on the can, but how you are making that your version of it, and to the extent that you can keep it secret, then it can remain protected. And similar with, like, think of spices or the KFC and kind of how they make their chicken and what kind of, that kind of seasoning or spices, how they're kind of put together. That's again another trade secret. And so when you're talking about food and trade secret could be a big thing, especially if you can keep it a secret. I actually had a situation where someone reached out to me and she had made some sauce, or what I think it was some sauce, and she was at in like culinary school or whatnot back in my hometown, and she didn't think anything of it. She made the sauce kind of while she was there, and next thing you know, she looks up and the school is like selling it to like local grocery stores and things like that. And like her and her dad called me like, hey, do we have any kind of rights to it? I'm like, nah, probably not. Because number one, as part of you being a part of that kind of culinary school, you're probably kind of signing over all your IP or whatever to them. That's kind of part of the standard agreement, whether it's an employer-employee agreement or under that kind of student and university or school agreement. So definitely want to look at kind of those agreements a little bit more closely. But so I think it's an interesting phenomenon, and this stuff can be valuable as IP, whether it's a trade secret or a trademark. So it seems like in your case, that kind of the trade secret or the way you kind of put it together or kind of made it was out there, and therefore it seemed like it benefited you in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yep, in the most ironic way, it did. Yep. And I think it's really interesting too, David. The thing that as I was kind of on this really unfun journey between two lawyers was that, so, you can patent a formula for medicine, right?
Yep.
But you can't patent a recipe. And why is that? Because traditionally up until now, cooks were mostly women of color. They're mostly African American women. And so this whole idea of what you can patent, what you can't patent, I mean, I'm sorry, but it's totally biased.
Yeah, no, for sure, and that's interesting. I would, it'd be interesting. I have to kind of take a bit more of a deeper dive into that in terms of like, why is that the case? Is it kind of to maybe try to prevent some of these things or some of these groups of people from kind of being able to benefit? But to be honest with you, Cynthia, I think it's more valuable that you get we were talking about if you had the option between a trade secret and a patent. I think it's more valuable that you get the trade secret just because a patent only lasts 20 years anyway, and then it's kind of in the public domain and anybody can use it. Whereas, hey, people still trying to figure out, okay, what's Coca-Cola's secret sauce? Because nobody knows it. Like you said, other cola brands is out there, but nobody kind of knows how Coca-Cola makes their drink, and it seems like that's a big part of their economic advantage over the marketplace. And I think that because that lasts forever as long as you can keep it a secret. So I think that having that trade secret protection, which it isn't talked about a lot, but I think that can be more valuable than a patent. Just if it came down to either a trade secret or a patent, just because one lasts for a finite amount of time and one lasts forever as long as you can keep it a secret. So I think, but a lot of people just don't kind of know about trade secrets just because it's not, number one, it's not talked about, but number two, unlike trademarks or copyrights or patents, where you're dealing with either the USPTO or the Copyright Office, trade secret is more so you just get an attorney involved and saying, hey, what do I need to do to protect this thing? And then them telling you, as you mentioned, hey, you have to kind of make sure it's locked or nobody has access to it to the extent that they don't need access to it. And it's more so you're not filing a trade secret to anybody. You're just kind of taking these kind of measures, reasonable measures to protect it and keep it out of the hands of everyone. And people just don't know that, or they unfortunately don't have the money to hire an attorney who's going to kind of give them the rundown of how can you kind of maintain protection of this thing. So I think trade secrets, especially in the food industry, is something that people need to kind of get kind of hip to or get some information on to the extent that that's in the industry that they're in, because it can be valuable in my opinion.
That's brilliant advice. That is fantastic advice. Everybody listen to what David just said. He's really great. It's great.
Just think about, but obviously you work with an employer and you're kind of dealing with that whole aspect of it. But I would imagine that, again, you're good with trademarks just because trademarks last forever as well, as long as you keep using it. But just, that maybe is a little bit different from you're making the making the ice cream and people kind of not knowing how you make it. And by them not knowing how you make it, that kind of gives you this added advantage over the marketplace as far as kind of making money and kind of your product selling better than others. So I don't know. I think it's interesting stuff for me as well. But it seems like you not only have you have multiple trademarks with the not fried chicken. You have the Life Raft Treats, and I thought it was interesting with the whole story of Life Raft Treats that you had said on Shark Tank. I was going to see, can you maybe kind of give that origin of that story, because I thought that was a pretty interesting one.
Well, as we had discussed before, I was like, okay, there's got to be something better than working these many hours for somebody else and just being really tired all the time. And so it was actually a line from Mad Men where, that series with John Hamm, where he thinks that he's about to leave his wife, but she's actually leaving him. And she says, oh, I'm going to go marry this other dude and whatever. And he's like, what? This whole time you've been building yourself a life raft? And so that's what I was doing in the last restaurant I was in. I was building in my head a little life raft. I was like, I'm going to paddle away from all this and go somewhere better. And so that's why I named it Life Raft.
No, that's a pretty cool story. And I think it's always, when I see an interesting name like that, I'm like, man, I wonder what's the story behind that. And yeah, I thought that was interesting. So cool. So do you just have 2 trademarks, or do you have like other trademarks outside of Life Raft Treats and Not Fried Chicken?
It's just that for now.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Nice. So then I guess going into the whole Shark Tank experience, what was because it seems like I've had a number of people on who kind of went on Shark Tank, and it seems like kind of each story is a little different in its own way. What was like the origin story behind going on Shark Tank? Did you want to kind of get things blue? Obviously a big part of going on Shark Tank is just kind of now you're kind of to the masses, you're getting a chance to market and advertise a product to the masses. But what was kind of your kind of story or reasoning behind, okay, we need to go on Shark Tank to get this thing to the next level?
Right. Well, one of their casting agents had contacted us a couple of years back, and we weren't ready. Like, I didn't feel the business was ready. We didn't have the sales numbers. We just weren't developed enough. And I didn't want to go on there and, they say, how much have you sold? And I'm like, $28. So we felt like the year that we went on was the right time. And the numbers looked good enough. And, it would have been great to have gotten an investment, and even more than an investment, some connections with how to scale up the business to the next level, which is, it's kind of like when you have growth, it's each step at a certain point, after a certain point, each step is like much bigger than the step before it.
No.
And so it'd have been great to have some advice from that, but also just the marketing opportunity to get out there in front of, an audience and be on a program that streams, showing the product off was pretty great and pretty appealing.
Nice. So then was it, I guess, can you take me a little bit through that day as far as, okay, it's Shark Tank Day, kind of we're walking down the hallway as we maybe seen so many times
Yeah.
on these interviews. Are we like kind of nervous as get up, or are we like kind of cool as a cucumber? I guess, how was that experience? Because I've had people tell me like they had to stop the show because they were sweating profusely, or some people were they were a little bit more calm, or some people thought they were calm, but as they got out there, they became extremely nervous. Were you, I guess, what side of the fence were you on?
We were pretty nervous. My husband,
Okay.
John David, and I, we were pretty nervous. But we had each other, which was great, because the people who go on there by themselves, I'm like, man, hats off. I would forget everything I had to say. I would just like freak out. But we were together. And so, having somebody else who kind of helps you remember what you're supposed to say and all your talking points. And honestly, it was such a surreal experience. The whole thing was just so different from anything I've ever done before, that I had to be so present to not just forget everything I was supposed to say and just start saying random, totally crazy stuff, that it was easier to actually just kind of lean into it and just be like, you know what, we're here. I feel really silly. I feel really goofy. I am really goofy. So let's just put it out there and just have fun, and whatever happens, and, none of it's going to be bad. So.
Right. No, yeah, and I would imagine, like you said, I think having somebody else that you're going out there with to maybe help you out if you forget a line, or just have you kind of bring down the nervousness or the anxiety. It seems like that'd be a lot more preferred than going out there in front of 5 sharks or whatever on your own. Now you have to remember this opening and kind of remember all the numbers. And I don't know. It seems like that's tough. But one of the things that they teach us as lawyers or as law students is kind of never going to a negotiation with maybe you and maybe multiple other people on the other side. And it seems like being 1 versus 5 it can be pretty intimidating. But I would imagine being even 2 versus 5 can be intimidating. But it seems like you guys held your own, which was pretty cool to see. So then, like, after the show, like you said, it would have been great to maybe kind of land a deal. But then, so after the show, I guess, how was that? I would imagine that kind of sales kind of shot up, or at least, a nice uptick. What was like kind of the morale or whatnot kind of after the show, or after you kind of guys walked out of the tank?
Well, it was a bummer. We were like, oh man, but we were also like, hey, we're in LA. Let's go to Koreatown and eat. So we were kind of like, wow, that was a really different kind of surreal experience. And we were kind of bummed out, but we were also like, you know what? Nothing bad is going to happen from this. Hopefully it's going to be good. Hopefully we don't get edited in a way where we look like total idiots, which we didn't, thankfully, because you never know how you think you're being really like funny and bubbly, but then maybe on TV you seem really flat and kind of like, ooh, whatever.
Over trying too hard or whatever the case.
Right. You never know how you're going to come off. So we were like, okay, fine. We've done it. It's good. We'll see. The initial, there wasn't some kind of huge, it wasn't like some kind of huge bomb went off with sales and it was totally crazy, but we did have our best holiday seasons ever.
Nice.
And I think just generally it's really good because, like I said, it's a thing that streams. And I think during the holidays when people had time, they probably sat down and watched it. I don't know how many people watch network TV when it happens anymore. I think a lot of people wait and stream it later on. Right. So it's kind of like a nice, it's kind of like a nice ad that kind of keeps playing over and over again.
No, for sure. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right on that. It was one question I wanted to ask. Did they know that it was like ice cream beforehand, or not? Obviously on a show, it was like, okay, this is not chicken or whatever the case may be. Did they really think it's fried chicken until the time that they bit into it, or did they kind of know it was maybe not fried chicken?
I didn't know anything about any of the products or the people that come out until they're out. Yeah.
Wow. So, okay. No, that's interesting, because I thought they maybe were brief, like, okay, this is chicken, but maybe act like it. I mean, this is ice cream, but maybe act like it's the food. And obviously their expression on TV, it seems like they didn't know it was not chicken until the time that they maybe had it in their hands. So that's interesting that yeah, they didn't know until I guess it was time to kind of eat the food. Well, I get so that was cool. So then kind of moving on, what and I always like to ask this, what was it's a two-part question, maybe one of the biggest challenges that you guys had to overcome with kind of the business with Life Raft Treats up until this point in time? And then on the flip side of that, what was maybe one of the biggest breakthroughs that you guys had in the business? We know that kind of this thing is not like a linear thing, but it can be like a sine wave that goes ups and has its ups and downs. Always like maybe to try to get from the guests one of the kind of biggest challenges that you guys had to overcome up until this point in time, as well as maybe one of the biggest breakthroughs that I know you feel like, man, that was a big one for us.
Yeah. Um, we had a product recall in 2023, which is still really hard to talk about. It was freaking awful. No one got sick. We contained it. We cleaned it up. We had to change everything we did. And it was one of those things that happens and it's in the moment, it's so stressful and so horrible and it's so difficult because it's not just that, you're going to lose a pile of money. It's the fact that you have to figure things out now. You have to fix so many things. Like the ship is going sideways and you gotta get it back up and put it in the right direction. And all of that can be really overwhelming. But also at the same time, it forced us to grow in the direction we needed to grow into faster, more sensibly. And, it's kind of a lot of times with a business, especially if it's a really small business like this one, and, growth is like more than you expect at times. You don't take the time to sit down and look at things and say, what is this company really about? Where are we really going? What really makes sense with what we know how to do, with the kind of place that we're in, the part of the country that we're in, the people we can get to have on our team, what makes the most sense? And so after that, we, had to change our focus. We had to whittle it all down. We thought we wanted to have a retail shop, and that's just not in our wheelhouse for now. We aren't retail people. We don't know how to run retail. We don't have enough bandwidth to begin to do that well. So we're not going to do that right now. We used to do a lot of events and weddings, and it took off and it was doing really well. But it also got to the point where we realized that if we're going to do this really well to where there's enough revenue produced by the effort and time and staffing involved with having this, then it's going to be like running a catering company inside of an ice cream company. And we don't do that either. And we're not good at that. And we don't want to do that right now. So, it just pushed us in a direction where we had to be grown-ups. We had to put our big boy and big girl pants on and make some real decisions and look at hard things and think about how we wanted to start over, basically. And the company is so much better for it. The product is very safe. We have great sanitation protocols. We have better training. We have a better team. It's just, it's like once you're at rock bottom, you're at rock bottom. You're either going to be there or you're going to pick it all back up.
Right. No, I think that's well said. I'm a little bit more I guess what I think of recalls is a little bit more different, just kind of being here in Michigan and working in the automotive industry, just because it seems like that happens time and time again. So it's after a while, it's like, oh, okay, who cares? But I would imagine going through it for the first time, especially when you're talking about in the industry that you're in, it can be like a very frightening thing to have to deal with. But it seems like you guys came out on the other side, better for it, which is a great thing. And again, I love kind of that authenticity, just because I think that's kind of the reality of businesses. Is that I know a lot of times people talk about it like, oh, I make so much money, and they think it's all kind of peaches and cream or rosy. But it's some real moments that you have to kind of make some real decisions and kind of, are you going to fight or are you going to flight, or what is the response going to be? So again, I think it can be done, but it is also one of those things of kind of just, I'm a big part of just knowing what you're getting yourself into, just being informed. And okay, if you don't want to do it after being informed, that's great. But if you kind of being informed of all the things that can happen and you're still okay with going into it, then that's great as well. But yeah, the big thing is just kind of being informed of all these things that can happen. And I think, again, especially in the food industry, one of the possibilities is kind of having a recall of products. And I appreciate you. I know it was difficult to share that, but I appreciate you sharing that story. So I guess on the good side, hopefully, what was maybe one of the breakthroughs of the business that was like, okay, that was good. That kind of kept us going, or maybe got us to the next level that maybe you can share with us.
Yeah, we had to really think about what, being a chef, a classically trained chef, I wanted to make everything myself in-house. I wanted to do everything from the very beginning to the very end, and it's really just not logistically possible to do that and to do it well and to have enough space and enough time and all those other things. So we started having the waffle base for the chicken manufactured, and we had to start looking at it that way of what makes the most sense for us to do in-house. And so as we do that, we are looking at co-manufacturing so that we can get more out in the market out there and have it done by someone who can make it and package it and have it be a faster, easier process without having so much hands-on labor in-house, and saving that skilled, very skilled hands-on labor that we have in-house for direct to consumer, like the seafood tray that you saw, like the hot dogs, the peaches, the things that are fragile that you can't really make in mass right now.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. So then I was going to ask you about that, because I know you named kind of the 4 items right now. Do you guys have any like new products on the horizon that you're maybe kind of thinking about or playing around with? That I get, to the extent that you can share them, great. But if you kind of can't share them, that's good as well.
Nuggets.
Oh, nuggets. Okay, no, that's cool. So is it like the chicken nuggets? Is it any like release date or a date to kind of get those out that you guys are thinking about?
We're working on all of that. We're working on the packaging for it, and the nuggets are really fun because they're like a little bite-sized thing, and I'm a big proponent of novelties are great because it's a little controlled size, and if you want to open the entire bucket and eat the whole thing at once, you can do that. But also, like, you can have one piece and be satisfied and be like, oh, yum, that's good, that's enough.
Yep.
Versus if I have an entire pint in front of me, I want to eat the entire pint.
Yep.
And it's just too much for me to be able to control myself in that way. So the nuggets are really fun because they're very shareable and they're great for a party. And it's, you get to have a little treat and you don't have to have all of it all at once.
No, yeah, and I would definitely have to buy those when those come out, because I have a 6-year-old daughter and she loves chicken nuggets. So it'd be cool to just kind of give her those, and she's going to be like, "This is my chicken nuggets." Yeah. We love ice cream as well, so it's going to be like a perfect marriage for her. The two things that she loves: chicken nuggets and ice cream. And I would imagine that she's going to have some fun with that. So I have to definitely stay in touch to see when those coming out, because I have to get those for her. So then I guess the last maybe 2 questions I have for you is, what advice, and I know we talked about it a little bit kind of at different points during the interview, but what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs? So someone who's maybe watching this thing, they have an ideal, or maybe they have the foresight that, hey, maybe my position is not too safe or as safe as I thought, and I maybe need to start thinking about something different. I have these ideas, or I have maybe something that I want to kind of bring, but I'm not sure for whatever reason. So they're kind of playing this double dutch game of kind of, do I get off into the entrepreneurship game or do I not? What advice would you give to that person?
First, it's a really long haul. It's, it's easy to go on, listen to, what's it called? How I Built This. And you listen to the story of how someone started off with something they were making in their garage and suddenly they're making like $80 million a year selling this thing. What you don't hear is everything that happened in between and how hard it was. And it's like that for everybody. But, again, with social media and the highlight reels that everybody sees, it, might seem like it's easier and it might seem like it's harder than it actually is, but it's a slog. But if you want to start off as small as you can. Be really careful about what you spend your money on. You don't need crazy logos or branding or marketing to start. You need to have that product that's really good that people want, that they can't get anywhere else.
Yep.
And spend the time and money developing that and thinking about that. Starting small, starting lean, trying to take the opportunities when they come and trying to, take that leap for growth when you can, but also, not overextending yourself early on. I think that can be a big trap for people sometimes.
Yep. No, yeah, and I love everything that you just said. And that's, I think, part of the reason why I'm kind of also doing this podcast is that, like you said, a lot of times on social media or some of the TV shows, even Shark Tank, even though Shark Tank gets off into it a little bit, but not a whole lot, it's almost this thing of, okay, yeah, we made $12 million last year, but they don't kind of talk about the ups and the downs. Or we made $1.5 million last year in revenue, but they don't kind of talk about the ups and the downs, which it can give people like a false sense of kind of reality of, okay, yeah, I can do that, or let's do it. But then when you get a chance to kind of have an hour-long conversation or a 45-minute long conversation with someone, they can kind of get off a little bit more into the minutia of, okay, these are some of the challenges that we face. I think it's I don't know. Like I said, it just informs the person, a potential entrepreneur, a little bit more than maybe some of these highlight reels that they're seeing on social media or on TV. So no, I appreciate you saying that. And then I guess the last question is maybe number one, how can they follow? I'm not sure how much you're on social media, but how can they follow you or Life Raft Treats? And then how can they purchase the product?
Sure. I'm not on social media myself anymore, but the businesses were Life Raft Treats, life.raft.treats on Instagram. And people can find us all over. Not Fried Chicken is in about 500 different retail locations across the country. If you go to our website, which is www.liferaftTreats.com, there's a store finder. You can put in your zip code. It'll find a store close to you. And we also ship our super special products through Goldbelly, like the hot dogs and the seafood platter and the peaches we sell through Goldbelly. And occasionally we have really fun holiday things too, like we do the Hungry Dad dinner for Father's Day, which is very fun. We do that too.
Nice, nice, nice. Well, I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for those nuggets, and I appreciate you sharing all this stuff. Audience, hopefully you guys had your pen and your paper because I think Cynthia dropped a lot of nuggets that you can take with you. Pun intended, I guess, a lot of nuggets that you can take with you to kind of help you in your decision making process on whether or not you want to kind of start a business, but and kind of really getting off into some of the realities of it. But it can be rewarding, and it seems like no, I would imagine that she would say the same thing as far as the rewarding experience of starting something and kind of having to deal with stuff and overcome stuff and kind of still be going since 2018, I think it was you said you started. So what, 7 years ago?
Yep.
So that's amazing to have a bit. Trust me, for people I've worked with on the IP side of things, having a business that's still kind of chugging along 7 years down the line, that's something to be proud of. So hopefully, audience, you guys got something out of it, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.